Bill Greenewald. I was born in Denver in 1926, February the 1st. I was going over to some friend's house. We were working on a model fighter plane, a flying model. And we got there and the news came over the radio, and we took the plane up on the top of the house and loaded it with firecrackers and threw it off the house. Blew it up. I signed up, enlisted when I was 17 in 1943, the latter part of the 43. I was trying to get into the Naval Air, which I was accepted for, but never went into it actually. I was moved out into the V-12 program, which was up at CU at the time. From there, I never got out of that program until I went to midshipman school and on into the various places I was at in the service. And I went directly from the V-12, well, from civilian life into the V-12 program, which was a college program, officer training basically, and that it was a big unit. I'd been at CU for just about a year, 3 semesters or so, and then we went to after I got into CU, I went up to Pocatello. They transferred me up there to the University of Idaho. And from there, that was a 2-year school. I'd taken all the engineering courses I had there, so they didn't know what to do with me and sent me to midshipman school. So I was relatively young getting into that program. I went to midshipman school in New York City, at Fort Schuyler. Spent about 3 months there, and then received my commission and went on down to the Naval Training Center at Miami for, I think it was 6 weeks there. And from there was sent right overseas. I picked up a transport at San Francisco. It was a troop transport with 1,700 CVs and about 45 young officers, about the same as myself, just boot ensigns. And we went right to Tokyo. This was immediately after the war was over. The war ended, I believe, in August, and we arrived in Tokyo there about September, sometime in September. Didn't really get into the city much. Our ship came into Yokohama, and I spent one afternoon ashore, and we picked up our ship. When we got to harbor at Yokohama, the ship we were to get to, the USS Saint Paul, heavy cruiser, was anchored over just a little ways from us, probably a quarter of a mile away. And the captain of the ship that we were on it was a merchant ship. He was a little bit unhappy with the facility there. They wouldn't give him an anchoring point, so he just went out in the middle of all these ships that had been there for the surrender and dropped the hook and shut down the signal bridge and everything else, closed his radio down. We sat about 3 days, so we sneaked up and got the signal lamp on the bridge and signaled the port authority, port director there, to send a boat out for us. And we got ashore, and then there was no place to stay. We found a young ensign wandering around with a truck, and he took us to a seaplane tender, which was, at that point, everybody was going home. And they'd stolen all the blankets off the ship when they left, all the Navy blankets. So we slept on barren mattresses with a pile of dirty sheets. I kept pulling more sheets off the floor to try to keep warm. It was just freezing cold. And then the captain there said he didn't have rations for us. There were 10 of us in the group by then. And he told us ensign to get us off there. He didn't care where we went, but get us off. So he found a friend with a PBM Mariner seaplane and shipped us off to Okinawa. And we had a choice of 2 places they thought the ship may have gone. One was to Hong Kong, the other was Shanghai. So we took a straw vote and decided we'd go to Shanghai, and unfortunately the ship was there. So we had to report aboard immediately. Didn't get to tour the Orient like we kind of hoped. I was assigned to the an 80-inch turret as a junior officer, and shortly thereafter I was the turret officer. The senior one was transferred out, or went home for discharge. And we sat there in Shanghai for about 3 months. It was pretty much restricted because a fair share of the city was off limits to military personnel. So we didn't get too far from the waterfront there. There were quite a number of ships in Shanghai at the time. I'm not sure what the reason for being there was. Well, Shanghai was surrounded by the communists at that point. It was still a Republic of China for the Chiang Kai-shek's regime, so I guess you'd say. And so when we vacated there, I guess it wasn't too long before the communists took over and all the nationalists left and went to Formosa and various places, Hong Kong. One interesting thing here, while I was on the ship, there was a person came aboard by the name of K.C. Wu, which the name stuck with me for some reason. We went to China about a month ago, and while we were waiting at the Denver airport, I met a Chinese couple who were heading back there, worked for Level 3 here in Broomfield. And he asked where we were going. I mentioned the various cities. He said, "Oh, well, my wife is from Shanghai." And we discussed it a bit, and turned out to be, I asked her if she had ever heard of K.C. Wu, and she looked rather shocked. She said, "That was my father." And I don't know what I did with him. I just met him very briefly, and the name stuck, I guess, because of its unusual short name there with K.C. I don't know what it meant. But then he went down from being mayor of Shanghai to a mayor or governor, whatever it was, of Formosa after that. And I guess he didn't get along too well with Chiang Kai-shek. And according to them, he'd put out an assassination request on the gentleman, on her father. And that's about all I heard about it then. But yeah, we left there in January and came back to the States. I stayed on the ship until about July and was discharged or released from active duty. They didn't give us discharges. They gave us what they call it, a certificate of service, I think it was, meaning we were still in the reserve but not active. So that was so they could call us back for Korea. I was on a destroyer. It was a main battery director officer on that for a 5-inch battery. Well, we did a lot of shooting. Nobody shot back at me while I was on the ship, at least. We did quite a bit of bombardment work and mostly screening on the carrier task force. Coast Song, I think, was the area, was the bomb line on the East Coast. The ship, after I left, it was hit off the Chinan Po. I was not aboard at the time. It was just one small shell hit it. Nobody was hurt. Made a kind of a mess out of the radio room, or emergency radio room. But it was, shell came right in over the chow line on the thing. Well, there were people called back from random from all over your military careers during war. They weren't just late comers by any means. I don't know, I think they just randomly picked them or threw the numbers up in the air and pulled them. It went pretty quick. Came back to CU, Boulder, and finished up there on the GI Bill. Well, after we finished up with Korea, we took a job in Denver, and after college, of course. Couldn't find a job. There were no vacancies then. I took a job in a warehouse in Denver, a plumbing warehouse. I had an architectural engineering degree. And let's see, as we finished there, and then we went to, Carol and I were married after our term at CU. Then we went back to work for a couple of years, about a year. and then was called to Korea. And went back with the same firm, and decided that wasn't for us, and we bought a little hardware store down in Denver. 46th and Josephine. Not a very good neighborhood, right with the packing house districts. We had about 850 square foot store there. So it was very small. One of our neighbors in Denver moved out here, and we came out to see what it was, and we're all young people, and families were cropping up all over the place. There were a lot of kids. It was, I guess, the baby boom hitting here. They were sure all about the same age, great groups of people. Got to looking around, we knew Val Swan through my father, and we'd heard he was involved in it, so we came out to look and saw a house we liked, and told, it was one Joe Maroney had, he says, well, if you can get us a hardware store franchise in the shopping center, we'll buy your house. He said, oh, I think I can do that, and it had already been leased. And somehow he did it, and called me up and says, can I cash your deposit check? You've got the lease. So we had to shut down real quick and get out from under our other commitments there, which our lease was out down there, and they were building the elevated I-70 down 46th Avenue. So it was a good place to be leaving, and all worked out really nice. It was terrible. Yeah, we didn't have any money to stock, and there weren't too many people. And we just, Carol and I and our kids, one employee for the first part of the time, we managed to survive, paid the bills. And we expanded it about 50% of what our original store was, from 2,400 to 3,600 square feet. And we somehow opened our big mouths and ended up buying the old Grocery Boys grocery store building, which was kind of a far out jump for us, but it worked out wonderfully. Where Target is now. Safeway was over there, of course. It was on the west side of the parking area, and then had just a strip of about 10 stores, I guess, across the parking lot from that. And then they built the east side of the shopping center. And after that, then we moved. We had this store about 17, we've been, I think it was 17, 18 years in our single location there. Well, we had 2 fires in the center. The first fire was, we had a pizza place down at the far south end of the shopping center, and something happened there. It was arson, but nobody was ever convicted or accused of it. But they set off an explosive charge in the beauty shop right next door to the pizza parlor, and the paint store there had he also did paint contracting. He had a lot of open cans or bulk cans of paint in the place, and it was a very good fire. We had considerable smoke damage down at our end of the shopping center from that. And then about a year later, it's just about the 1st of November, I think it was, that I happened to be looking out of the window of our house, about ready to go to bed, and saw the flames from that fire. And ran down there, and Jim Van Buskirk and I got up on the roof with a garden hose and were squirting down, while the cans of paint were exploding and going through the roof. And then our fire was a little different. We think a unit heater failed in the back of the place, and the fire in there burned itself out. And Bill Brophy was a part-time policeman, I think, more or less then, or shaking the doors. Came by and saw our windows were all smoked up and put his hand against it. They were hot. He was also an auxiliary fireman at the time, or volunteer fireman. And they put the alarm in. They came over and broke the windows out, and as soon as the fire started, they got their hoses in there. made pretty much a mess of the place. But we were out of business for well into January from that. That happened to be the first night that we had a freeze, and the fire had weakened the ceiling, so it sagged, and the swamp heater next door, the pipe broke on that thing and flooded that cavity in the roof, and we had a big flood in our place from that, as well as all the soot and other damage. We fortunately were pretty well covered on insurance, but it was quite a blow. Cleaned up the inventory, though.
Imagine.
Well, we just had a spectacular increases in sales from the time we moved into that building. It was 20 to 40% a year for quite a few years, and then when Storage Tech took their Chapter 11, our sales took a terrible beating there for, well, it took a long while to build that back up. We'd pretty well recovered and was starting to make good increases when we decided we'd just shut it down. Our daughter went to Colorado College, and her son went to DU. And they both worked there in the stores for most of their younger years. And then, of course, Dan took over the store later. Dan is still here in Broomfield. We're still trying to shut down the corporation, get things settled there. And he's out hunting for something he wants to do beyond that. I think it's terrific. It's really going well. Very impressive. It's something I had looked forward to for many, many years. See this become a city county or one entity. Well, we've eliminated the varied court systems and having to go to the 4 different counties to pay your speeding ticket or whatever, I guess. The police don't have to run their prisoners to court in all these various places. Have our own location here for the storing prisoners while they're going through the court processes. And likewise, the sales tax situation is into one city, one area. It gives us a pretty good tax base to work from. And now, without sharing it, I think one of the biggest things is the court systems. Get it down to one basic group there, and the sales tax. I was on the election commission when we first started. The second incorporation election, the first one failed by just a few votes. The second one made it. I chaired that. Well, we had a couple of recounts, and it was not unlike this election. We went through and counted the ballots, and we counted by intent. If somebody said hell yes or hell no on the thing, we took them as what they meant. Then a group of them got pretty upset about this thing. It was only about 6 votes different. So we went through and recounted them. We threw out all the improperly marked ones. We picked up a few extra votes, but what didn't make a significant difference. It was very, very close, though. I was president of the Merchants Association, on the bank board, and the water department commission, and planning and zoning, and board of zoning, board of adjustments. I was on one budget committee, and been president of the Kiwanis Club and Rotary Club over the years. I don't think a lot of them even knew it happened. I don't think they understand, no. It isn't taught in the schools, apparently. I think there just isn't much opportunity for them to hear about it. The schools don't seem to be particularly interested in this type of thing. I don't know why. Yeah, it was a kind of an intense era. Hard to describe how the feelings of people, I think, at the time, and everybody was different, I'm sure. But we didn't hesitate to go enlist in the service. We were quite anxious to go and take part in it, I guess. It's kind of dumb, but we did it. I don't know, it sure popped up again for Desert Storm. That was quite impressive. It all died immediately afterwards. I think the media has done a lot to destroy that side of it. They took such a negative attitude toward Vietnam, and I think we had a justifiable reason for being there, but the media blew it out to pieces, made us the villains instead of the communists, and they ignored Korea totally. There were darn near as many people killed in Korea in 4 years as there were in Vietnam in 10 or 12 years, whatever it was. But you don't hear that on anything. Quite a nasty war. All wars are, I guess. But when it came out of World War II and went to college or on the GI Bill there, they were anxious to get out and get on with their lives. And now they're just, like I guess people have always been, they just started and went along a natural course of affairs and without too much disruption. You certainly got the disruptions for those 3 wars, 4 wars actually now. It'd be great. I think it probably helps almost everybody. A few it doesn't, but I certainly don't begrudge the 4 years I spent. And it seemed like a lot of time at the time, but looking back, it was a very brief period. Didn't amount to much. But it sure teaches some responsibility and discipline, patriotism. Yeah, we got a great country here if we can just keep it going that way.